सेव किया था ना?
मैं सिर्फ इसलिए गया था क्योंकि उसने मुझे कॉल किया, that's it. But listen तो.
Save it for someone else.
जिंदगी में सेव करना जरूरी है, मगर जब बात पैसों की हो, सिर्फ सेविंग से काम नहीं चलेगा। इक्विटी म्यूचुअल फंड्स में इन्वेस्ट कीजिए और अपने सेविंग्स को आगे बढ़ने का मौका दीजिए।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
The big news this week, of course, is Prime Minister Modi in the US. And all of the discussions so far, they've, of course, focused on, the bilateral ties between the countries. A lot of it has focused on defense. Some of it has focused on tech. But we, in this episode of Macrosutra, are going to talk about the economic relations between India and the US and what can actually come out of this trip. What is it that the two countries want from each other? I'm TCA Sharad Raghavan, Deputy Editor at ThePrint, and we have with us Radhika Pandey, Associate Professor at NIPFP. And now, Radhika, could you tell us, let's start off with a slightly forward-looking, what we can see coming out of this trip. What is it that India wants from the US on the economic front? And what is it that the US wants from us?
So I think they both have a mutual interest in fostering the economic relations, both in terms of trade as well as in terms of investment. Right. So what we have been seeing is that India has a trade surplus with the US. But if you look at the composition of what India is exporting to the US, it's mostly precious stones, it is engineering goods, electronic goods, pharmaceuticals. So I think what is going to now happen, or what will take this relation to the next stage, is bringing about more technological orientation to the trade, bringing in more technology aspects to the trade relation, bringing more tech-related products in the trade relations between India and the US.
And we're talking only about merchandise trade here, because services is different.
Yes, here we are talking about merchandise trade. So if we look at merchandise trade commodity basket, it's mostly this precious stones and engineering electronic goods. Within the merchandise trade basket, we can talk about services separately. But on both fronts, what will happen, or what is expected, is to bring about more technological orientation, to step up technology-related exports and imports between countries, which would also include defense, which would include strengthening the value chains for semiconductors and electronic-related items. So bringing in all these new items in keeping with the changing geopolitical landscape, that is something that is going to be expected out of the Modi's visit to the US.
And this is something that even the US wants from us?
Yes, this is something that, because they also would want, so what they would want is that India should, revise or revisit its rules, because we have seen recently, while we have been liberalizing our foreign direct investment norms, we have liberalized FDI norms for defense sector. We have opened up quite a few sectors to 100% in foreign direct investment under automatic route. But on the trade front, we have been going back on the trade liberalization. We have increased tariff rates. So that is something which is not, which the US is not happy with. So they will encourage, or they will nudge India to reconsider those restrictive trade policies and make Indian markets more open for US trade. Because US is having a trade deficit with India. So they would want to step up. They would want to have greater market access within India, which would also lead us to the next part of it, which is within the IPEF, which is the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. It's a 14-nation bloc of countries in the Indo-Pacific region. It's the forum for cooperation between these regions, and it has 4 pillars. One of the pillars is supply chain efficiency, another is clean energy, corruption-free economy, and the 4th is trade. So while India has joined the first 3 pillars, India has been away on the 4th pillar, which is trade. So that is something which I think US will nudge India to also be part of the 4th pillar of the IPEF, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, so that there is greater trade relationships and there's greater openness which India might not agree to because there are a lot of other conditions attached to it in terms of labor conditions, environment, and so they consider this against the interests of developing countries. So while there are a lot of good points emerging, I think fostering technology cooperation is something that is going to happen. Also on services exports, there's a lot of potential for stepping up services exports from India to the US, mainly in terms of financial services, like underwriting and other insurance-based services. So I think there should be more discussion around stepping up and diversifying the both goods exports as well as services exports.
Absolutely. And so now that's looking ahead, looking a little back into the past. How has Indo-US trade been progressing over the last few years? And you say that we have a surplus with them.
Yes.
Has that surplus been growing or shrinking over time?
It's been growing, and it's been growing at a brisk pace. So if we just, present a snapshot of India-US goods trade, we see that in 2009-10, the trade surplus was somewhere around $2 billion, which rose to around $17 billion by during the pre-pandemic period, which is 2019-20. And as per the latest estimates for the financial year ending March 2023, it has risen further to $28 billion. This is the trade surplus. That means our exports of goods are more than our imports of goods by $28 billion. The other interesting aspect is that a lot of things where earlier we were net importers, now we have turned net exporters.
Oh, fantastic.
So like engineering goods and electronics, we used to be net importers. That means our imports used to exceed exports of engineering and electronic goods in 2009-10. But now we are net exporters, and our exports of engineering goods have been rising at a very brisk pace. So we are talking about India-US trade. So yes, it's growing at a very fast pace, and the surplus is increasing because our exports are rising at a faster pace as compared to our imports.
Right. And so now trade, of course, is just one part of our relations with the US. The other, of course, is investment.
Right.
So now on the investment front, have US companies been increasing their investment in India over the last few years?
Yeah. So here we look at three elements. We look at the foreign direct investment, which is the inflows, the inward foreign direct investments, where US companies are coming and setting up shops here, or setting up wholly owned subsidiaries, or doing greenfield investments in India. So that is inward foreign direct investment. Second element is how Indian companies are setting up subsidiaries in the US.
Yes.
So we need to look at both these elements to understand the rising investment relations between the two countries. And here also what we see is that US is one of the prominent sources of foreign direct investments in India. If we look at the period prior to 2018-19, on average, the FDI inflows from the US used to be around $2 billion.
Right.
And from 2018-19, it has jumped to $8 billion. Average FDI flows from 2018-19 till 22-23 has been $8 billion.
Right.
The point to note is here that this is slightly uneven. It's not the sustained increase that we see in the case of trade. Here it is uneven, and it's driven by various factors. For example, in 22-23, our aggregate FDI inflows declined overall.
In
total as well. And a major reason for that was decline in inflows from the US. So from, if we see from the pandemic period, pandemic 2020-21 was the peak year when we received more than $13 billion from the US. As FDI. Next year, we received $10 billion, that is 21-22. And the last financial year, we have received $6 billion. So due to the recession, due to the decline in demand, due to problems in the US, we have been seeing a plateauing of FDI inflows. But if we look at a slightly medium-term period, average FDI inflows from the US over the last 4-5 years is more than the prior 5 years.
I see.
So that is on the inward FDI flows.
Right, and us investing there?
Yeah, in us investing there is actually picking up more.
Wow.
And there is a very interesting survey we should look at. There is a survey conducted by the CII, Confederation of Indian Industry. They come up with a report, which is a survey of asking Indian companies about their footprints in the US.
Right.
So this is a very recent report. It's released in May 2023. And it says that as of now, as of today, around 163 Indian companies have invested in the US. And the quantum of investments is more than $40 billion.
Wow.
More importantly, these investments have generated jobs for the US. They have generated jobs to the extent of more than 4.5 lakh. Employment generation has happened in the US across the 50 states of the US. So that is important. And if we look at, the same report was released in 2020 also. And there we see that there were 155 companies. So that means from 2020 to 2023, 8 additional companies have joined the list of companies who are doing overseas direct investments in the US. And these are all direct investments. These are not portfolio investments. These are long-term investments having long-lasting interest in the host country. So what is important to note is that while 8 new companies have joined, it's also that the existing companies have increased their scale of operations.
Right.
And it's a very broad-based investment horizon. Indian companies have been investing in services, in emerging technologies like cloud computing, AI, and so on. One of the most prominent example is of Wipro.
Right.
Wipro has been incrementally increasing its investment in the US to augment the cloud computing capacity in the US. So that's about the investment part.
So now, this sounds like a good thing, but is it actually that our Indian companies are investing there, creating jobs there, and creating value there, whereas potentially they could have been doing the same over here?
So see, if we look at the literature on overseas direct investments, there is a stage within the life cycle of a company. Initially, a company can only, cater to the domestic market.
Right.
And then it starts to export to the international market. And then when it reaches a higher matured stage in its life cycle, it is able to set up entities abroad. So, look at the companies who are doing outbound direct investments are not just any company. They have passed through that life cycle of first catering to the domestic market, then catering to international market through exports, and then finally reaching a matured stage in their life cycle where they are able to compete with the international market and doing diversifying their value chain, which is equally important for us. So that is why it is a very positive development.
Right. I guess that's basically then that means that India is giving birth to its own MNCs.
Yes, it's giving birth to its own MNCs. It is resulting in creation of diversified businesses, conglomerates, providing job opportunities in the US, creating repatriation, export of services, so investments, inflows. There are a lot of things that go around, and it's always better in a matured economy. You don't just see inward FDI inflows.
Right.
You also see equal amount of outward FDI flows. But in India right now, if you compare, so we have a table where we are comparing inward FDI flows from the US and how much Indians are investing abroad. Direct investment. There is still a gap, but what we are saying is that this gap is being bridged, and we are becoming significant sources of investments in the US and helping them diversify. Look at Air India. Air India purchased 200 Boeing. So that also, in fact, the US President Biden acknowledged that created so many jobs.
Correct.
So that is something that is a sign of a growing, emerging dynamic economy, that we are able to invest and we are able to procure the emerging technologies from the other countries.
Right. And now, post-pandemic, there has been a shift across many countries, not away from China, but basically that they don't want to put all their eggs in one basket. They want to kind of diversify their supply chains. Has this impacted Indo-US relations in terms of not only trade, but also investment?
Yes, so that is one of the common concerns, and while India-US relations have always been good economically, but recently there has been a tectonic shift, mainly because of China-related concern, which is a common concern for both India as well as the US. US also wants to create a multipolar Asian economy, and not just trying to. They are helping India so that India is able to counter China, and we are able to curb these aggressive activities of China, and also trying to create a counter to China in the Asian region. So that is the US's objective, and also with India's deficit with China has been rising.
Right.
And even during COVID, and despite geopolitical tensions, India's deficit with China has skyrocketed to $83 billion, which is a big amount. So there is a conscious effort to diversify trade away from China, though it's a long-term, medium-term phenomenon. But economic, geopolitical considerations, these coupled together are bringing these two countries together, and that is resulting in helping them to talk about diversification of trade and think about what more items could be added to the trade basket so that they move away from the conventional exports that they have been doing, but also bring in more aspects, more commodities, which will also help them also deal with the changing geopolitics.
Right. So, I mean, from all that you have said, it seems that both countries can only stand to benefit from each other.
Yeah.
But what are some of the niggling issues that still remain, the contentious issues that still remain?
Yeah. So, one is that US has been nudging India to buy the armed drones, 31 armed drones.
Right.
That is, though India is all in favor of that, what US wants is that during this visit, this deal should be sealed. And it needs to be seen whether that deal is sealed during this visit, because while the Defense Acquisition Council has given the go-ahead, it needs to still follow some bureaucratic hurdle. But it is something, it's, I think, a matter of time. But this is a very significant deal which would help the US, which is dealing with its debt ceiling negotiation. We just saw that they have suspended the debt ceiling. So they do need that much funds, and it's a big deal valuing $3 billion. And for India also it is good because it will enhance its surveillance capacity. So US would want India to seal this deal during this visit. That is one. The other is from India's point of view and the US, there are some trade disputes that are pending at the WTO, and what both the countries would want to is to go ahead with out-of-court settlement of these issues, and we need to see how many of these issues are addressed or solved. Somewhere India will take the lead, somewhere US will take the lead. That is important. And as we mentioned, the two more points are regarding asking India to become more steady in their investment regime and trade regime, not keep changing the rules so frequently, which is a problem with the Indian policy circle, that we keep changing our rules.
It's not just the US that has an issue with this. Our domestic companies have an issue with this.
So that is something that needs to be addressed at the ground level to ensure that we get a sustained flow of investment. We need semiconductors. We need to strengthen the value chain in this field. Indian government has set up a incentive system of $10 billion to boost semiconductors. So all these things would there would be a meaningful step in the next direction only if we are able to harmonize and simplify, rationalize our rules governing trade and investment, and not go back again on raising tariffs. And also, as I said, US would like India to join the fourth pillar of the IPEF, which needs to be seen whether it's joined. India would also want to talk about the H-1B visas, because that is a big issue particularly during recession time, and because Indians are one of the dominant holders of H-1B visas. And I think I understand some movement towards that has already been announced today. US government is going to consider a pilot project to at least ease the norms for some Indians, and then they will see how it goes forward. So I think on these issues, there is a need to gain further clarity. And what we've already started, like the ICET, Initiative for Critical and Emerging Technologies, there should be next steps on those, because we've been meeting the US counterparts, the security advisors have been meeting, then there have been visits where they are, fostering this technological collaboration on quantum computing, AIs, semiconductors, and so on, and bringing the private sector entities also, educational institutions, fostering research and development. So I think on these issues, we should see at least some development. One visit will not have all the positive results, but at least one step ahead or some indication of what is going to be the next step should come out of this visit.
Now, of course, when the PM goes anywhere and he does anything, there's a lot of interest from you, our viewers. And so we have a lot of questions from the audience, so we can take a few.
Sure.
One of them, you've spoken about the tariffs that India levies on imports. But this question is, it's regarding the tariffs that the US levies on exports from India. So the question is, how much improvement are we expecting on India's exports to the US? Given that the tax barriers that there are already there in the US, can we see Modi ji kind of helping with those? And which sector is likely to lead the economic kind of relations between the two countries?
So I think if we talk about within trade and services, it's important that we boost our competitiveness of exports. What we have seen, if you look at the services data, we have seen that, the other services component, IT is, of course, one of the dominant exporters, export components, and US is one of the recipients of the exports. But what we are also seeing is that within other services also we are seeing an improvement. So that is something that we need to cash in on that opportunity and further boost export competitiveness in financial services. We have seen that the government has identified certain sectors as champion services, so which includes all these. But if we look at data, especially concerning our banks, overseas presence of Indian banks abroad, offering various kind of subsidiary services like underwriting and other kinds of services, we don't see that considerable presence. So I think that is something where there is an immense potential for boosting financial services exports in the US and other advanced economies by looking at the examples of financial services center like London, Singapore, how they have boosted their presence in international markets. So that is something at least this visit can give a kickstart to discussions around these issues.
Right, exactly. So I think there is quite a lot of interest in finding out what Modi ji can push for us in the US. So the next question also is, with regard to the services sector, our exports, what is it that the US can do and what our Prime Minister can convince them to do that will further boost our IT exports? Yeah,
so I think one is this entire ICET, the Initiative for Critical and Emerging Technologies. It's not a deal. It's a kind of a framework which provides for cooperation and co-production on a lot of emerging technologies, including defense, education, all elements of artificial intelligence, semiconductors, and so on. And I think if there is a greater synergy in these areas, it's going to benefit both India and the US, because both the countries are looking for diversifying their value chains, and this is one platform where their interests converge.
Absolutely. And now, of course, there has to be a question on the visa issue. So the question is, whenever recessions hit in the US, lots of layoffs happen, especially of migrant laborers and of professionals. And or the visa rules become more strict, say in respect of the H-1B visas. So can't something be done in respect to this so that the interests of Indian employees over there are protected.
Correct. So that is a important issue, and I think that is something on the agenda of discussion between the two countries. And as a precursor to that, we've already seen some kind of positive indications being made by the US government, where they have announced that they are going to move in the direction of easing the norms, because currently what happens is once your visa expires, you have to leave US and go outside the US for some months and then come back. So I think on these issues, they are going to ease the norm, but how permanent or how intrusive and how significant it become, that will depend on the outcome of the talks. But this is definitely something which is on the agenda of discussion.
Right. So there you go. Now, what we've seen is that the Indo-US relations are already strong. That is, economically, they're already strong. They have been getting stronger post-pandemic. But now with the Prime Minister there are several avenues in which the two countries can enhance their cooperation. One is to do with critical technologies. The other is to do with actual trade and, reducing barriers to trade, such as tariffs on their end, on our end. Both of us can work together. And so there is a lot that at least the foundations of which the Prime Minister can, make while he's over there. All of it obviously won't be done in one trip, but he can make the foundations and then everybody else can take it forward after that. So that's all we have for you in this episode of Macrosutra. But before you go, I have an appeal to make before you, which is please do subscribe to ThePrint. The link to subscribe is in the description of this video. It's very, very important and useful to us that you do subscribe, because it allows us to do the kind of ground reporting that we do. We bring you stories from across the country that nobody else does. We are allowed to do discussions on various current issues that nobody else does, and we bring it straight to you. But apart from that, subscribing to us also gets you several key benefits, key advantages. One is that you get priority passes to the exclusive webinars that we do, where we call in experts and we talk about various current issues and we get them to explain them. You can also write into us in our Your Turn section. You can write your opinions and we'll publish them. And of course, you'll have access to all of our exclusive newsletters that our editors write and that come straight to your inboxes. So please do subscribe. The link, as I said, is in the description. And thank you so much for watching.